The house always felt loud during the day, but at night it turned quiet in a way that made memories louder. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and the TV was turned off, Ethan would quietly leave the living room. He never said where he was going. Sarah noticed it for the first time on a rainy evening when she went looking for a flashlight. The hallway was dark, his bedroom door was closed, but a soft light glowed from the garage at the end of the driveway. Something about it made her heart beat faster, like she was about to discover a secret. She walked slowly, careful not to make noise. The garage door was half open. Inside, the old work light hung from a nail, casting long shadows across dusty boxes and unused tools. In the middle of the floor sat Ethan. His jacket was off, his sleeves rolled up, and his hands were covered in dirt and small cuts. Around him were pieces of wood, nails, and a half-built bench that looked rough but strong. He held a hammer like he wasn't sure if he was doing it right, and each time he struck a nail, his face tightened with effort and frustration. Sarah stood frozen. Her chest felt heavy. Mark had promised Ethan they would build a bench together. Last summer, right under the big oak tree in the backyard. Mark used to sit there every evening, watching the sunset, talking about life, laughing about small things. But Mark never got the chance. The accident took him too soon, leaving the house filled with silence and unfinished plans. Now Ethan was here, trying to finish that promise alone. He pushed a wooden plank into place, but it slipped. The hammer fell from his hand and hit the floor with a loud sound. Didn't pick it up right away. Just stared at the bench, breathing hard, his shoulders shaking. Sarah saw his eyes fill with tears. He quickly wiped them with his sleeve, like he didn't want anyone to see how much it hurt. Sarah's throat tightened. Since Mark's death, Ethan had been quiet but polite. He went to school, did his homework, ate his meals, and said, "I'm okay," whenever she asked how he was feeling. But now she saw the truth. He wasn't okay. He was hurting deeply, and he was trying to carry it all by himself. He picked up the hammer again and tried once more. His hands shook, but he forced himself to keep working. Each hit sounded like he was fighting something inside his chest. Sarah felt tears slide down her face. She wanted to run to him, hold him, tell him everything would be all right, but she didn't move. She was afraid he would close himself off if he knew she was watching. She slowly stepped back, leaving him alone with his work, but her heart stayed. In that garage. Back inside the house, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. The room still smelled faintly like Mark's cologne. His jacket hung on the chair, untouched since the funeral. She pressed her hands together, trying to calm herself. But her mind kept returning to Ethan's tired face and shaking hands. She thought about the day she married Mark. Ethan had been 10 years old, standing beside his father in a small gray suit, nervous but smiling. It had taken time for Sarah and Ethan to grow close. At first, he was polite but distant, careful with his words, like he didn't want to replace his mother. Sarah never pushed. She just showed up school events, birthdays, small talks in the kitchen. Slowly, he began to trust her. After losing his dad, he had pulled away again, locking his pain inside. Sarah realized something important that night. Ethan wasn't just building a bench. He was trying to hold on to his father. He was trying to feel close to Mark again, trying to finish something that death had interrupted. Every nail was a memory. Every piece of wood was a goodbye he never got to say. The thought broke her heart. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The house felt too big, too quiet. Grief lived in every corner. She had lost her husband, her partner, her best friend. But Ethan had lost his father, his guide, his safety. And now he was trying to grow up too fast, trying to be strong when he was still just a boy. Sarah whispered into the darkness, "You don't have to do this alone." But Ethan couldn't hear her. Her heart felt pulled in two directions. One part aching for Mark, the other aching for Ethan. She had promised Mark she would always take care of his son. At the time, she thought it meant school, food, and comfort. Now she understood it meant much more. It meant helping him through the pain she couldn't fix, but could share. She closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Images of Ethan in the garage kept returning. His quiet struggle, his lonely effort, his tears. By the time morning light slipped through the window, Sarah had made a decision. She wouldn't watch him suffer in silence anymore. She would step into that garage. She would pick up the tools. She would stand beside him, not as someone trying to replace his father, but as someone who cared too much to let him carry his grief alone. Whatever it took, she would help him finish that bench. And maybe, together, they could start healing the broken parts of their hearts too. But she didn't know how Ethan would react when he saw her there. She only knew one thing. Everything was about to change. The next evening, Sarah didn't hesitate. She walked toward the garage before Ethan could slip away unnoticed. She carried nothing but determination and a quiet hope that he would let her in. When she opened the door, the familiar warm light hit her eyes, and there he was, kneeling on the floor, hammer in hand, staring at the half-finished bench. He looked up, startled, his brows furrowed like he hadn't expected anyone to notice his nightly ritual. "Hey," Sarah said softly, trying to keep her voice calm. "I hope you don't mind. I thought maybe you could use some help." Ethan froze. His hands stopped moving, the hammer hovering above the wood. He didn't say anything at first. Sarah could see the mix of emotions on his face, anger, embarrassment, and a tiny flicker of relief. He finally spoke in a low, tense voice. "This was my thing?" Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. "I know. It was yours and your dad's." She took a careful step closer. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore." Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he didn't move. Sarah could feel the tension in the air, the weight of months of grief and silence pressing down on both of them. She didn't force the conversation, didn't try to talk too much. She just stood there, letting him process her presence. After a long pause, he slowly lowered the hammer. "I keep messing it up," he admitted quietly. "Dad was supposed to show me how. Now I can't even do it right." Sarah knelt beside him, careful not to crowd him, careful not to frighten him. She gently held a wooden plank steady while he hammered. Each tap sounded lighter than before. She could see his breathing slow, his hands become steadier. "Your dad would be proud of you for trying," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And I'd be honored to help you finish it." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, the guarded walls he had built around his emotions began to crumble. The garage that had always felt cold and empty suddenly felt warmer. He nodded silently, letting her help, letting her be there. They worked together through the evening, passing tools back and forth, adjusting pieces of wood, checking measurements. Sarah talked quietly about Mark, sharing small stories and memories that made Ethan laugh softly, the kind of laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. He told her stories too, memories he had buried inside since the accident. Each story, each smile, each tear brought them closer. As the hours passed, something shifted. The distance that had existed between them since Mark's death began to vanish. Sarah wasn't just the stepmother anymore. She became a companion, a witness to his grief, a helper in his struggle. And for Ethan, Sarah became someone safe too. Lean on someone who didn't push, someone who just showed up. The bench slowly took shape under their combined effort. Sarah marveled at Ethan's determination. His hands were rough, his movements sometimes clumsy, but the care he put into the project made her heart ache. It wasn't just wood he was building. It was a connection to his father, a way to hold on to memories he feared losing. And now, the first time he didn't have to carry it alone. There was a moment when their hands brushed while adjusting a plank. It was brief, accidental, but it carried warmth and reassurance. Neither of them pulled away. Instead, they both froze for a second, sensing a bond forming, an emotional bond. Deep and meaningful, built on shared pain and understanding rather than anything else. Sarah realized how much she had missed these moments with Ethan. The laughter, the shared effort, the quiet talks, they were healing in ways words couldn't describe. She felt her heart swell with pride and love, not in a romantic sense, but as someone who had chosen to care deeply. And she could see it in Ethan, too. In the way he smiled when she helped hold a piece of wood, in the way his eyes glimmered when she told a story about his dad. Ethan, for his part, felt a relief he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. The weight of grief had pressed down on him for months, making everything feel heavy and impossible. Now, with Sarah beside him, the burden felt lighter. He could focus on building, on remembering, and on feeling supported. The act of finishing the bench became more than a task. It became a shared journey, a bridge between past pain and present healing. They talked about school, friends, and dreams for the future. Laughter and small jokes filled the spaces between hammer strikes. The garage, once a place of loneliness, became a sanctuary of connection. Every nail they hammered together, every piece of wood they adjusted, strengthened not just the bench, but the bond between them. By the time they finished for the night, the bench was rough but solid. They stepped back, brushing sawdust from their hands, and looked at their work. Ethan's eyes sparkled with pride, and Sarah felt a warmth she hadn't realized she had. Missed in months, it was more than a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of healing, trust, and companionship. Ethan turned to her, his voice quiet. "Thank you," he said. Sarah smiled, feeling a lump in her throat. "You did it," she replied. "We did it together." For the first time since his father's death, Ethan felt truly seen, understood, and supported. And Sarah, too, felt a new closeness to him. A connection that was comforting, pure, and meaningful. They had found a way to share their grief, their memories, and their care for each other without crossing lines, without confusing feelings. As they left the garage, Sarah glanced back at the bench. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Carried memories, laughter, tears, and a bond that had begun to heal both their hearts. The nights ahead promised more work, more stories, and more quiet moments of connection. And though neither of them could have predicted it, these evenings in the garage were slowly reshaping their lives, filling the empty spaces left by loss with hope and understanding. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. She had stepped into Ethan's world, and he had let her. And for both of them, that choice marked the beginning of something new, a bond built, not on obligation, but on love, care, and the courage to be there for each other when it mattered most. The garage, the bench, and their shared effort had become the first step toward healing, and neither of them knew just how far this journey would take them. But one thing was certain. They would face the days ahead together, side by side, one hammer strike at a time.